Hi there and welcome to this video in the IBM Cloud Foundation Skills Series, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create a Gen 2 VPC. Now if you've been watching the previous videos about virtual private cloud, then you'll probably recognise this architecture overview. It's pretty much the same one that we created when we were working with Gen 1, and obviously in the last video we explained what the differences were between Gen 1 and Gen 2. So what I'm going to do in this video really is run through creating exactly the same kind of application structure in Gen 2. Hopefully what you'll notice is that doing it within Gen 2 is actually an awful lot quicker, but also that it's pretty much exactly the same as well. So this is the architecture overview. I'm going to create a VPC in the Dallas region. It's going to again be called Rules VPC. It's a project name that I quite like to use, so I'm going to use that as a naming convention. What I'm going to do is create a subnet in the Dallas 1 zone and also and then in the Dallas 2 zone. I'm then going to put a web server into the into each of those different zones, and then I'm going to configure a load balancer so that we can then just see that the two sites are actually load balanced, and you can see that we've then got effectively a highly available website. So without ado, let's head off to the IBM Cloud Console. Okay, so here I am in my IBM Cloud account at cloud.ibm.com. So if I click the hamburger here and then go down to VPC infrastructure, then I enter my virtual private cloud dashboard. So I want to create a Gen 2 VPC. So I'm going to just go down here and click this button here. So create VPC for Gen 2. I just need to make sure that this Gen 2 logo comes up. And if I wanted to switch back to Gen 2, I just need to click this link here. Okay, so let's create this VPC. All I need to do is give it a name. So I'm going to call this Rules VPC. I'm going to use lowercase as well because that's part of the naming convention. So Rules VPC, it's all IAM managed, so I'm going to put that into my VPC resource group. I'm going to give it some tags, so my tag's going to be my project name, what it is, so I'm going to say VPC, and who created it, so James, just so that I can then see it in my list of resources. Again, we're going to leave the, it's going to create a default ACL, access control list, for me, so we'll look at that in a little bit later. And I'm also going to allow the default security group to allow SSH for me and also allow ping. So those are two rules that we're going to see and we're going to have in. Now this one here, again, this is about allowing access to classic infrastructure and our classic resources. So if we do have some resources which are available and we want to link our VPC to in classic infrastructure, we can do that. And what that will do then is basically create a private network. So that'll be a private network between our VPC and our classic infrastructure. So we can then integrate the two more easily. You will need to have virtual router forwarding or VRF enabled on your account to do that. There is a bit of outage, unfortunately, to enable that. As I say, if you want to link the two, then it's really necessary to do this. I haven't got any classic infrastructure that I want to connect up to, so I'm going to just click cancel on that. Next, I'm going to use some default address prefixes for each of the zones, and this is, just bring this up for you. So you can see that this means that it specifies the address range basically which the subnet's connected. So we'll just leave that as default for now. If you want to use your own address ranges, then uncheck that, and then you can go and sort that out when you create the subnet. But again, just showing this at quite a high level for now. So I'm going to create my first subnet. I'm going to call it Rules Web Server subnet because it's for rules. It's going to be a web server, and I'm actually going to create this in Dallas 1. So I'm going to just put Dal 1 at the end of that, just so that I've got just so that I know where it is as well, because that's quite important. The resource group is going to be my VPC resource group. I've chosen my location as Dallas 1. So I can now choose an address range. So again, you need to think about how many machines really you're going to be creating within this VPC, or within the subnet rather, because you need to have a large enough address range for the number of resources. So if you're creating something that's of average size, then you can stick with 256. That'll give you 256 addresses in the range. If you're creating something really massive, then you can go right up to 4096. If you're doing something really small and you want to keep it quite tight, then you can go down as far as 8 addresses. I'm going to leave this at 256. Actually, I'll just show you if you change it. You can see this prefix changes as well, and you can also see the address space changes too, and likewise it will reduce and change there as well. As I say, I'm going to leave this at 256. The next thing I'm going to do is actually attach a public gateway. So if I leave that detached, then that means that my subnet will have no access at all to the internet. I want to be able to attach this to the internet because obviously it's going to be some web servers. So if I don't do that, then nobody's going to actually be able to access the web servers. You can leave it detached. So for instance, if this is subnet for databases, then you might want to not have a public gateway on there. So you might want to leave it as detached. Okay, so we just check our little summary over here as normal. I'm being charged $1 for this because I've got a floating IP address attached to the public gateway. And I'm just going to click the Create Virtual Private Cloud button over there and give it a couple of seconds. And what we should see is that our VPC has been created, and we have our default ACL and our default resource security group. So let's go and have a quick look at our default ACL. So again, the ACLs are exactly the same as they are within within Generation 1. The way that you create the rules and the way that the rules work in order, so from top to bottom, is exactly the same. There's no changes there. So just to recap, if I wanted to create a rule here, so let's say deny from any on port 80 to any. So if I were to save that as an inbound rule, what I'm then doing is actually any traffic that comes in which is on port 80 would be denied, and anything that meets that would immediately be kicked out. Anything else would be allowed. So, but obviously I don't want to do this because I want to have, this is going to be a web server, so I'm just going to delete that rule. So for speed and just for the sake of this demo, I'm going to actually leave my ACL as it is. I'm not going to change that. What I am going to do is I'm going to change my security group. So again, security group is effectively a private firewall which goes, or virtual firewall which goes around my virtual machines. So let's go and have a look at the rules that are in there already. What this is basically doing, it's allowing any traffic from the same security group. So any server within my security group can actually access any other server in the security group. It's allowing any access on port 22 from any source. I'm going to change that one in a minute, and it's also allowing ping from any source as well. So what I'm going to do first of all is create a couple of new rules. So I want this to be a web server. So I want traffic to be able to hit these servers at port 80. And it's going to be it's going to be TCP. Those are the different choices there. I want it on port 80, and the source can be anything, because it can be anywhere on the internet. I'm going to create another rule, and this is going to be for 443. And again, source is anywhere, so I'm going to save that. And I'm also going to change this rule here for port 22, which is the SSH port, because effectively I'm going to click edit here, because effectively I only actually want my my own client to be able to, my own machine to be able to actually access these from the internet. So I'm just going to go to a website called What's My IP, and this just gives me my IP address of my machine as it stands at the moment. So if I just copy that, and I'll then create this new rule. So I'm going to update this rule. The port is 22 and the source is a particular IP address, and I can just put that in there. Now if I was in a group of administrators, and I could put a cider block in there, because obviously there'd be more than one person potentially with more than one machine, or if you have something like a jump server, then you could restrict that down to one IP address. So I'm going to save that. And so now what I've got is I've basically got a virtual firewall which can surround my my virtual servers, which will allow me to SSH in, but only from this IP address, i.e. the IP address of my Mac. It will allow ping, and it will allow anybody to attach via port 80 and 443, so web server addresses. And these outbound rules, so this will allow any protocol out to any destination. So again, because it's a web server, then that's probably a reasonable thing to set. But if you wanted to, tighten those rules up, you can do. Okay, so let's go back to our menu. The next thing I actually want to do is create SSH keys. So again, this is exactly the same as under Gen 1. So we click Add SSH key. So we're going to enter the name of the key. So I'm going to call this rules key. And again, it's I need to put in the resource group. So VPC RG. It's going to be in the region Dallas, and I just need to then create my public key. So I come into here. So I'm in my SSH directory. So it's under my home directory. So this is a Mac. Again, you might see something slightly different on Windows. So I just need to type SSH keygen to create my key. So the file name is going to be my. I'm going to call this rules key. And just to give a bit more security, I'm going to give the key a passcode as well. So we just type that in. Okay, and just enter that again. So that means every time I use the passphrase don't match. Try that again. There we go, that's better. So so this just means that when I use that passkey, I also need to know a password. So it just adds an extra layer of security. Okay, so if I list my directory, I can see that I've now got my rule key, and I've also got rule key pub. So I need to look at rule key pub. And I just need to copy this information. So copy that, and I just need to then paste it into here and add my SSH key. Right, so now we've got everything we need. So I've got my SSH key here. Now I've got everything I need to start creating my virtual server instance. So let's go and create the first virtual server, and in my subnet. So it's going to be a web server. So again, using my naming convention, I'm going to call this rules web server, and it's in I'm going to put this in Dallas 1. It's still defaulting to Dallas 3 for some reason. Dal 1, and it's 01. So this just tells me it's for the rules project. It's a web server. It's in Dallas 1, and it's server number 1. So so again, that's a good naming convention. You may well have your own. So I'm going to obviously leave this as rules VPC, because that's the virtual private cloud I'm creating this in. I need to put a resource group, so I'm going to use my VPC resource group. Some tags, so I'm going to say this is a web server. It's going to be in the rules project, and again, James created it. My location I'm going to leave as Dallas. So right now we have these particular images available for VPC Gen 2. More are coming over the coming weeks and months. So by the time you see this, you may well see more image types here. So I'm going to stick with CentOS. You can actually create custom images as well. So if you've got a machine that you've created already and you want to reuse that image, you can do. There are some rules around that, but we'll talk about those perhaps in another video. So once I've chosen my image, I'm going to stick with CentOS. You then just need to decide how much CPU and how much RAM you need, and this also shows you as well how much throughput you've got as well. So these are the popular profiles. If we look at all profiles, you've got balance, compute, and memory. So with balance, you can go from 2 vCPUs through to 8 and 4 gigabits per second for throughput, right up to 48 vPCUs, 192 gig of RAM, and 80 gigabit per second for throughput. Compute is similar, so 32 and 64, and then 64 gigs for throughput. Then if you've got memory intensive workloads, then you can go right up to 256 gig of RAM as well. So I'm going to stick with the popular profiles. I'm going to stick with balanced. Down here I'm going to put in my SSH key. So remember, you need your SSH key to actually log into the server, so make sure you don't delete any keys from your workstation, and just make sure that you have the key that you're creating this with. Right, this next box here, this is quite interesting. I'm going to actually populate this. So what this helps me do is actually run some commands as the server is actually creating and booting for the first time. So I'm going to import some data here, and I've got a script here or a file here with some commands in. So I'm going to choose that. So what this is effectively doing is it's running some commands which are, so I've got a yum update, so it's going to update the kernel for me and do package updates and things for me automatically. It's then going to install the HTTPD server, and it's then actually going to create an index.html file for me under var www/html. So I'm just going to change the contents of the HTML, the index page. So I'm going to say this is web server 1 in Dallas 1 as a title, and I'm then going to say this is web server 1 in Dallas 1 for the body of the text as well. So I'm going to leave that at that, and then it's just going to start the web server for me. Okay. So next we've got the boot volume. So the boot volume is always 100 gig in size. So if I just click edit on there, you can see that I can change the name of it if I want to. I'm quite happy with that because it fits with my naming convention. I can't change the profile, the size, or the IOPS for the boot volume. I can. There's a drop down here for encryption. At the moment, only provider managed encryption is available. So the disk is encrypted for you, but that's the only option that's available at the moment. And again, as Gen2 becomes more mature, then we will be providing other encryption options, and you'll see that auto delete is enabled. Now this is quite important, and again I can't change that. So what happens to this disk when I delete the server is that the disk is also deleted. So if you delete the server, the disk is gone and all the data has gone off the disk as well. So if you're putting data on this disk that you want to keep, and you want to keep it for the long term, perhaps longer than the server itself, then don't put it on the boot volume. You need to create a different volume, or you need to make sure that you've backed it up somewhere else. So I'm going to leave that as it is and click apply. So again, with the data volume, I'm not going to add a data volume, but if I wanted to, it's fairly simple. So here I can just add a name for the data volume. Here I can choose a profile. So I'm going to show you, I can make this either tiered or custom. So I'll leave it tiered for the moment. So I think I can then make this volume between 10 and 2000 gigs in size. So let's say 1500, and then I just need to select my IOPS. So I can either choose 3, 5, or 10. So again, the IOPS relate to the input-output operations per second. If I go for custom, then what that allows me to do is actually enter a custom value for my IOPS. So if I know more precisely what my disk activity is going to be like, and I know what kind of IOPS I want, I can then actually create a disk with a set number of IOPS. Again, and then this just shows me the throughput for the disk as well. So so for instance, it's got 31.25 megabits per second for that. It might go down to 3 if I just have 200 IOPS. So you can basically see and play with that as you need to. Again, with the encryption, it's all in provider managed for the time being. And the auto delete switch now is by default disabled. So that means that when the server is deleted, the block storage volume will actually persist, and you'll continue to pay for that block storage volume. If I click that to enable, then obviously when the server's deleted, so will this volume. But if you've got data that needs to persist longer than the server, then always have this disabled, and you can always detach and reattach this storage volume to other servers as well during its lifetime. The next one here is network interfaces. So if I wanted to create a new network interface, then I can go along and do that. So if I wanted to, let's say it's going to create ETH0 for me, or it's all by default. If I wanted to create ETH1, then I can do that, and I can put that on a different subnet as well if I had a different subnet. So if, for instance, you had an interface and you had a subnet which was for databases, then you could have a new network interface which then connected straight to your database subnet, for instance. Right, I'm going to cancel that. I'm not going to create a new one. I'm just going to check my details over here as usual, and everything looks okay to me. So I'm just going to click Create Virtual Server Instance. So what you'll notice about this is that creating virtual server instances is actually pretty fast. So it's already starting up, and what we'll probably find is that the server will be available probably within a number of seconds. Will actually be green and ready to go. So let's just give that a bit of a refresh. It's still starting up. Well, in the meantime, let's go and create our second subnet. I'm going to create a new subnet now, and we're going to create this in Dallas 2. So let's go and do that. So I'm going to call this rules subnet Del 2. Well, I called it rules web server subnet Del 2, didn't I? So let's do that. So rules VPC still. So the resource group again is VPC resource group. So this time I'm going to put this in Dallas 2. I'm going to leave these exactly the same. So you can see that we've got the same address prefix, or the same number of addresses in each subnet. The only thing I'm going to change here is the public gateway, because I want a public gateway there as well. So I'm going to then just create the subnet, and that subnet should create fairly soon. There we go, the subnet's now available, and you can see that if I were to just pop into here, then you can see that it's using the same access control list as well. So there we go. Right, so let's go and immediately go and create our virtual server instance there as well. So you can see this one is still starting up, but hopefully that won't take too much longer. So I'm going to create a new instance. So I'm going to call that rules web server, and I'm going to call that Dal 2, because this one's going to be in Dallas 2. And again, I'm going to use it with 01 because it's going to be the first web server in Dallas 2. Still rules VPC. The resource group is VPC resource group. Again, my tag, so I'm going to say it's the web server. It's for the rules project, and I created it. So location-wise, I want it to be in Dallas 2. Note if I were to put, so you can see here at the moment this is enabled. If I go to Dallas 3, then you see it's greyed out, and that's basically because I don't actually have a subnet created there. I don't know if there's a yeah, so down here it will say before you can create an instance in this zone, you need a subnet. So again, that's a little warning there. So let's change that back to Dallas 2. So again, I'm going to create this with CentOS, and I'm going to choose the balance profile. So it's going to be exactly the same as the machine that I've created elsewhere. I'm going to import my user data again, so my run command. So let's just choose that, and let's just expand that, because I'm going to just alter this ever so slightly. So this is going to be, so normally when you're doing a load balanced website, what you'd normally find is that the two pages are going to be exactly the same, the two sites are the same. I'm making these different just so that you can see the difference. So when we create the load balancer, you can see that the two are switching. So this is web server 2 in Dallas 2, and there we go, so web server 2 in Dallas 2. So there we go. Right, so we're going to leave the boot volume as it is, we're going to leave the data volumes as is, and the network interface as well. And I'm just going to go and create the server instance. Okay, cool. So what we've now got are our two servers. So you'll see that this one is now powered on. This is the one in zone 1. So let's go and just click here to have a look in there. Right, so I want to be able to connect to this from the internet. So the next thing that I need to actually do is give this a floating IP address. So this is a public IP address. All I need to do is click floating IP, and it then assigns a public IP address for me. So I'm just going to click there to copy it, and I'm just going to open my terminal up again. So let's just come out of there. So to connect to this server, I'm going to type SSH -I because I'm using a file. So it's going to be my rule key, and then it's root at, and then the IP address. Okay, so I want to continue, and I need to enter a passphrase now because it's the passphrase that I created when I created the key, and hopefully it will now let me in. There you go, so I'm now into the server. So if I then cd to var www HTML, then what we should see in there is my index file. So there's my index file. So if I just do a var on the index, then you can see this is the file that we created. So web server 1 in Dallas 1. Brilliant. So let's just see if that web server is now up and running. It certainly should be. So let's go back to this page here and just pop in the address for that. There we go. So you can see this is web server 1 in Dallas 1. So there you go. That web server is up and running. So that's fantastic. Okay, so let's go back and let's see how our second server is doing. So if I click back up on here, so let's just refresh this screen, and that's powered on as well. And let's just give it our floating IP address again. So let's reserve the floating IP address. So let's copy the IP address, and then let's just see if we can actually log in. So SSH -I. So I've got to put in my key name. So raw key, and then it's root at, and then the IP address. So yes, I want to attach, and let's see if we can attach. So let's put in my passphrase, and yep. So we're attached. So it's the second web server. So let's just see if it has actually created my web server yet. So it seems to have done. So so there's my index file. So again, let's just have a quick look at the index.html. So you can see web server 2 in Dallas 2. Right, so let's just see if we can then go and attach to that one as well. So HTTP, and then the address of that website. So there we go. We've got web server 2 in Dallas 2, and we've got web server 1 in Dallas 1. So now we've basically got our website, and it's running in 2 different locations. So in Dallas 1 and Dallas 2. Again, these are different zones in the availability zone. So so effectively these are different sites. But obviously, what you can't do is put 2 different IP or 2 different addresses effectively for your website into a browser. You need something in between. So let's go and create a load balancer. So what we do is we come back to our menu here, and then we click to create load balancers, and then we click create new load balancer. Okay, so let's give the load balancer a name. So I'm going to call this rules load balancer. Again, it's in the virtual private cloud, the resource group, VPC RG. Let's give it some tags. So again, rules load balancer. So then I'll know what it is, and then James, because I created it. It's going to be in Dallas, so this actually operates at a regional level. I want it to be public, so I want it to have a public address that I can actually access as well. I can create it privately if I want to, but I'm going to leave that as public. And then the subnet. So which subnets do I want it to attach to? Well, I want it to attach to both of my web server subnets. So just tick both those boxes, so it's on the 2. Okay, so next I create a backend pool. So let's click create pool. So I'm going to give this a general name. So I'm going to call this rules. So again, it's got a naming convention. So backend pool. So what the backend pool is it's effectively a pool of servers. So these are the servers that it will that are in the pool that the load balancer will serve information to, or serve requests to rather. So that's what your backend pool is. So the protocol, I'm going to leave it HTTP. You can change it to TCP because it's web server. It's also going to be HTTP. The method, we can either use least connection, so it will pass the next request to the least connected server. So again, if you've got a pool where you've got lots and lots of data coming through, and maybe you've got sticky connections, etc., then least connected might be the right one. You can also have weighted round robin. So if your web servers are of different specifications, then you can weight the number of requests that actually go to each server. I'm just going to leave this at straight round robin though. So request 1 will go to server 1, request 2 to server 2, request 3 to server 1, request 4 to server 2, and so on and so on. So leave that there. So stickiness, I'm going to leave that at none, but again, you can set stickiness to the source IP address if you want to. Now, in terms of the health checks, the health check is where the load balancer is actually making sure that the host, the web server itself, is still actually alive. So every now and again, it will go and ping or talk to the server pool and say, hello, are you still there? Can I still send requests to you? So in this case, we're going to send a request to /, which is the home of the web server. The protocol is going to be HTTP because again, it's a website, and we're going to push this to port 80 because that's obviously where the website is listening. So the interval, timeout, and max retry. So quickly to explain those. So the interval is how often is it going to try and do a health check. So this is set to 5 seconds. So the it's going to wait for 2 seconds to time out. So if it doesn't receive a reply back within 2 seconds from the health check, then it will try again, and it will try twice. So if after 2 tries it still gets no response, then it will determine that the web server is down, and it will stop sending requests to it. So that's around about 10 to 15 seconds that will take. So let's create that. Okay, next we just need to attach our instances. So we choose our subnet. So for the first subnet, we're going to choose, it's just looking up the instances for us. So we're going to choose WSDAL1, and then we're going to add the second one. So choose our second subnet, and there we go. So we choose that one there. So we're going to attach that. We're nearly there. So all we now need to do is create a front-end listener. So what is this? What is this load balancer actually listening for? So it's listening for things on HTTP. So again, you can choose as TCP or HTTPS, but we're HTTP. It's going to be listening on port 80. It's going to go to this backend pool. So this is what this is servicing, is the backend pool, and we can then decide whether or not we want a maximum number of connections. So I'm going to leave this blank, but again, if you decide that your website can only, let's say, handle 15,000 connections, then you can set that, and then on the 15,001st, it will then stop. It will then refuse the next connection effectively. And you can create multiple listeners if you want to, multiple pools. So one load balancer can actually handle different types of traffic as well. Right. So that's that configured. I'm going to now click create load balancer. And that's now just going to create. So load balancers actually take a couple of minutes or so to create. So I'm just going to leave that now. So let's just go and have a quick look at what we've actually created in terms of architecture. So what we've actually created is our VPC. So this is it's at a bare bones level. We've created our VPC within Dallas. So it's within the Dallas region. We've created a subnet in Dallas 1. As a first step, and this subnet is it has an ACL and access control list attached to it, and that access control list is allowing everything in and allowing everything out. So the access control list at the moment is actually fairly relaxed, or very relaxed. Probably what you want to do as a next stage is then just go and tighten that up once you've actually created all of your resources. We've also created a security group by default. So by default, this also allows all traffic in and all traffic out. And of course, we also added a public gateway as well to our subnet over here, so that we could actually get internet traffic in and out. The next step was to we added some rules to the security group and edited a rule in the security group. So basically, we added 2 rules: one to allow web traffic. So there's one for HTTP and one for HTTPS on port 80 and port 443. And we also changed the SSH rule, so the port 22 rule, so that it would only accept traffic from my laptop based on my IP address. So that was the second step that we took. So as a third step, we then created our first web server within the subnet, and then what we did was we went into Dallas 2, and we then created our subnet in Dallas 2. So again, it had exactly the same ACL, because we use the default ACL, and also the same security group was enabled there as well. So so what we ended up with was creating our second web server within Dallas 2. We had them both within the same security group. So again, this had the rules which allowed any web traffic, and also allowed me to attach via SSH. And finally, what we've done is created the load balancer. So the load balancer, as I say, takes a couple of minutes to create, and but we also created a back-end pool as well as a front-end listener for it as well. Right, so you can see that my load balancer is now active. So it's taken probably a couple of minutes, nothing too much more than that. Now, so there's some details here. Now, the one you're really interested in is this host name. So this is the host name this is the public host name effectively of the load balancer. So if you send a connection, a request to that web address, then hopefully what we'll see is a load balanced website. So let's copy that into my browser. Now you can see, so it says this is web server 1 in Dallas 1. So I'll just refresh that. Then on the second refresh, it goes to Dallas 2. It's back to Dallas 1, back to Dallas 2, back to Dallas 1. So whatever I put in this address, it effectively switches to the next web server. So my load balancer is working. So that's good. Right, so a little bit more about the load balancer then. So let's have a look at our health status. So you can see here that we've got some details on the load balancer, and you'll see the health status here. So you can see here that the health, if I click on there, you can see that both of those servers are actually passing at the moment the health checks. So let's just see what happens if I go and turn off one of these web servers. Let's just make this particular box a little bit smaller and just take this one over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do httpd -k stop. So this is basically turning off the web server, shutting the web server down. So hopefully in a couple of moments what we should see is a change to this. Actually it's changed in the background, not on that particular screen, but you can see here that the health status has now gone down to 1 out of 2, and if I just check that link again, you can see the web server 1 is now failing. So that's what I'm expecting to see. And if I go back to my load balancer, then I shouldn't see anything falling in a big heap. So let's just keep refreshing the page. And you can see now every time I actually refresh the page, you see it's just staying in Dallas 2. So that's actually working. So let's go back and let's just bring this web server back up. So if I do exactly the same command, but I click in start instead. So what if I go back to here and I start to refresh, then what we should see in about 10 or 15 seconds time is that it will start to go back to web server 1 again. So there we go, my web server's back up and my load balancer has started to direct traffic. And then if I just go back to my screen here and just close that down again and just refresh this page, then you can see that again my health status is 2 out of 2 and it's passing. Okay, so that's it for this video. So that's how to build a VPC in Gen 2. And hopefully what you've seen is that it's actually exactly the same as building a VPC in Gen 1. The only real difference is that the time that it actually takes to create some of these resources is different in so much as it's much quicker. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, then please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to speaking to you next time.